Hello and welcome to this tutorial video for Prague 1210 Rapid Application Development. This video is going to show you how to create a login page using ASP.NET, Identity, and OWIN. I've created the user interface here with text boxes for the username and password, validators on the fields to make sure they're not empty, the sign in button, and a feedback label to give the user some feedback if their sign in failed. In order to start, I'm going to double click on the sign in button to get to the code and create the click event. So when you click on the sign in button, that's the action that our site takes in order to sign in a particular user. So we need the two identity references that allow us to create the user store and the user manager objects, and we also need the reference to OWIN so that we can do authentication. So there's our reference to identity. And entity framework that allows us to create a particular type of user. And the last one, we're using Microsoft.owin.security. And that'll allow us to do authentication. So in order to sign in, we're going to perform the same steps that we performed on the registration page when we wanted to sign in a newly registered user. So we need access to the user store and to the user manager object. This time I'm going to do them all in one line. Create a new user manager object of type identity user. And the user store I'm going to declare right in here as a parameter. Because we don't really require any type of reference to the user store. Once we've passed it into the user manager, we don't really use it again. So it's okay to just create it right over here, rather than having a completely separate variable just for the user store. Save us a little bit of time. So the next step is finding the identity user in the user store. On the register page, we created a brand new identity user. But in this case, we're not creating a new user, we're looking for an existing user. So my identity user object, we're going to try to use our user manager to look in the user store and find a user with the matching username and password from the login form. So we'll pass in the username.text first, and then the password.text. And our user manager is going to go into the user store and try to find a user with the matching username and password that we obtained from the form. If they haven't found a match, that's a login failure. That is, the user's name and password combination aren't found in our user store. So if the user's not found, we're going to use our feedback label to tell them why. The else branch here is when we've found a matching user and now we want to sign them in. So the sign-in code itself is the same as the code that we did in the previous video for registration. We need to create our authentication manager object, create our user identity object, and then use our authentication manager to authenticate the identity. So we're going to use our HTTP context, parent OWIN context, for this authentication method. And then we're going to create our user's identity by getting our user manager to create an identity based on this user. So our user here that we've created, the identity user in our application, now we need to create the identity user for authentication. The authentication type is the same as it was before. Default authentication types, application cookie. We create our identity and then get our authentication manager to sign in our identity. Once this step is complete, we can redirect our newly logged in user on to the welcome page. So the same 4 lines of code that appear on the registration page when we're logging in new users is also used on the login page when we're logging in existing users. In the next and final video in the series, we'll look at what happens when the user gets to the welcome page, and I'll show you some tricks for showing or hiding page content based on the user's authentication.